Scotland's Borders district lies, as the name suggests, along England's northern frontier. Here, the landscape is gentler than the craggy highlands to the north. Wherever you look, centuries of human toil have left their mark on field and forest. In late September, summer has begun its retreat on Charles Jenks' estate, Portrack. Jenks is discussing how best to protect the irises from winter with his companion Louisa Lane Fox and Alistair Clark, the head gardener.
Yeah. But you don't need anything down the sides, it's just at the top.
The irises are just one element in Jenks' design for the DNA garden, which in turn is one element of an astonishing 30-acre design conceived as an exploration of our most profound notions of the universe. Part of an historical tradition of gardens with narratives, it holds a meaning far deeper than surface beauty.
You don't have to understand every meaning of astrophysics to understand this garden, for sure. But to know that it has these meanings, once you know that, you go around the garden and look at it in a different way. You become engaged, and that's very much an important part, that narrative element. It's to pull you forward, to make you search the meaning.
Most people are surprised when they come here, and I think it's the scale of it they're quite amazed at, and they think it's a relatively new garden. It's just started since 1990, but that's not the case. The case is that it was a high-class conventional garden until 1990, and then we sort of transformed it into a cosmic speculation garden.
The transformation began with a practical problem. Maggie, Charles's wife, wanted to convert a mosquito-infested swamp into a swimming pond for their two children. Heavy machinery scooped out the first of what would become the Dragon Lakes. The solution of one problem created another: what to do with the resulting small mountain of rich marsh bottom.
At the time, I was working on the idea of a double helix mound, a mound with two spiral paths that spiral up to a top, and so that people could walk down the mound while others were walking up, and they wouldn't push each other off the path.
In short order, the giant snail mound was followed by another lake and a long curving serpent mound.
The early influences in the garden are somewhat Chinese. We wanted to do what the Chinese do, is to pull in the exterior environment, and in our case it's a series of mountains in the far distance, to pull it into our garden. They called it the borrowed landscape.
The Chinese influence came from Maggie, whose childhood had been divided between Portrack and the Orient, where her father made his name and fortune. As an adult, she had written a seminal book on the subject of Chinese gardens. Charles saw the opportunity to create a new grammar of landscape based on science.
2,000 years we've been looking at the universe from the Greeks as made up of particles. And what we now know is that waveforms, which are spread out throughout the universe and unite the universe, are equal to the particles. So I saw that the waveform was a metaphor of nature that was as deep as the particle. So I thought, really, you know, in the end, a landscape of waves is a way of reconsidering the universe.
As Charles and Maggie debated the garden as a metaphorical universe, the real one dealt them a tragic blow. The breast cancer Maggie had defeated 5 years earlier came back. Once again, she fought with all she had. But in 1995, Maggie Keswick Jenks died at the age of 53. After his wife's death, Charles Jenks carried on the work of transforming the Scottish estate that he and Maggie had begun together. But the commemoration of her life didn't stop there. Today, he's in Dundee for the opening of a cancer-caring centre at Nine Wells Hospital. This Maggie, as the centres are known, is the third of its kind to be built in Scotland. The Dundee Maggies, a most atypical addition to the hospital complex, bears the unmistakable signature of one man, Frank Gehry, the Canadian-born architect best known for the Bilbao Guggenheim Museum. This building, his first in the British Isles, was a labor of love for Gehry, a heartfelt tribute to a lost friend.
I actually had a dream that Maggie came to me and said, Frank, it's over the top. Calm it down a bit. And, of course, it was all in my own head, my own worry, my own anxieties about it, and my desire to make it something Maggie would have been proud of and would address the issues that she wanted to have addressed.
Maggie's experience in cheerless hospital interiors had been difficult and demoralizing, and had inspired her to imagine a place where cancer patients could heal in comforting surroundings. Creating it became the focus of her last 2 years. Warm and bright inside, it will eventually be surrounded by the calming atmosphere of a garden.
Take your grief to nature is basically the words of, spiritual words. When you have something overpowering like loss and that, or, you're fighting for your life, you have to go to nature.
After Maggie died, Charles poured his considerable energy into the gardens at Portrack. Today, Charles and Louisa are giving their friend Jill Walsh a tour of the fruits of all that energy. The DNA garden.
Matt Ridley had written a little piece in the Times saying, well, the most important discovery of the 20th century is not relativity theory of Einstein, nor the quantum revolution, the ultimate particles, but actually it's DNA. And I thought, all right, it ought to be in the garden. And then, of course, I knew that DNA as a structure would be fantastic because I always wanted to grow plants up something, a climbing frame. And what could be better than the spiral coils of DNA? And so this is the sixth sense in the sequence, and it's a generalized sense with...
The DNA garden features 6 rectangles, each representing a living cell. At the center of each is a sculpture, combining the double helix of DNA with an object representing one of the senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch, and one for human intuition. Each is illustrated by plantings, with some unusual choices.
People laugh when we plant thistles and nettles at the sense of touch, and then alpine strawberries at the sense of taste, and thyme at the sense of smell. And in general, I think they think a lot of the garden's fun. So everyone that comes goes away with a different feeling about gardens, and it makes them think there's more to garden than sticking a few plants in the ground.
The planting of the gardens is left to Alistair. Horticulture is not Charles' strong suit.
He doesn't know a daffodil from a dandelion, and so he never does any gardening. But he's a landscape designer, which is a very different matter, of course.
For Charles, the garden's design is all directed to telling a very personal story.
And so this garden, in a sense, is a polemic about, how cells do communicate, how they commit suicide if they don't communicate, and therefore it's also about cancer.
At the converted Victorian gatehouse that is now the Maggie's Centre in Glasgow, Charles puts the finishing touches on the garden, an echo of the garden of cosmic speculation, but with only one theme: DNA.
When you get cancer, it's often caused by a breakdown in the cell's DNA. One mistake in 15,000 letters, just one spelling mistake, imagine, in 15,000 letters, can cause cancer. And so in these gardens for Maggie Centers, I brought the DNA in the cell into the garden.
Following the curves of the DNA sculpture is a small red garden planted with berberis, sedum, and red stones. The stones, denoting ribosomes of RNA, were painstakingly selected on rock hunting expeditions in the River Nith. At the Maggie's Centre, patients will be invited to bring their own rocks to add to the garden, a symbolic gesture of hope.
As the center grows, the rocks will collect, each one a patient, and they'll feel part, because you definitely become part of a team, a healing team, if you like. It's a very moving experience, the encounter of the patients with each other. And so I feel that they will start to take over the garden and create it, and that's what I hope happens, that the garden in 10 years is almost unrecognizably extended. Those fountains which turn...
Charles Jenks' most recent addition to his garden of cosmic speculation is a feature found in the great Renaissance gardens of Italy and France, a cascade, in this case representing the birth of the cosmos.
Anyway, what we do know, if you go back to the origin of the universe, which is here in the water, the origin is in mystery, and you can't see through mystery. We'll never see back to the very beginning of time, misnamed the Big Bang. What it is, though, is a quantum foam. Now, you see, look over there in the black.
Yes.
It's a mystery. All you see is yourself reflected. And so the universe starts off in a quantum foam, and that's what this first expansion is. After the origin, the universe expands faster than the speed of light. And then the universe proceeds gradually and in jumps, and each platform is a jump. So it jumps up and down, and then up and down, and up and down, rather like a Scottish reel. As the history of the universe unfolds to the present, and then the future, which is the very top, the next 3 billion years, we know what's going to happen. It's extraordinary. So this is the story of the universe in 13.7 billion years.
As old as time itself, this garden story, but as current as the latest reflections on science.
We come in a period of history where the science we've inherited from the modern age has been highly reductive, and that's hurt us, I think, terribly. We started to have a really gruesome view of the universe as this very simple, dead, inert, determined, reductive machine in which we were atoms scurrying around in our senseless way. And we're now living in a completely transitional period where the new sciences of complexity have taken over from the reductivist sciences, leading into a new worldview, which could be called cosmogenesis. The idea of the universe is a continually unfolding creative event, which is full of surprise, full of dynamism, and jumping from one level of organization to another.
The ideas may span the universe and time, but the garden stays firmly rooted in the Scottish soil.
I think he's taking his clue from the Scottish landscape. So it's of a scale that can hold its own with the greater landscape and become a mid-ground connector to the larger landscape.
The cascade is a puzzle to be fathomed, but like the rest of the garden, its underlying ideas express a much broader philosophy.
One of the ideas behind a garden that the Roman Cicero brought out was that he said there's first nature, which is wilderness, and there's second nature, which is field and orchard, which you exploit to eat. And then later, Italians said there's third nature, which is a garden. And a garden is first nature and second nature improved by art. And it's improved in such a way as to make you go slow. This phrase that emerges in the Renaissance, festina lente, hurry to go slow. It's very important in a garden to slow down. I mean, Universe Cascade is designed to walk up and take 2 hours, and you can't hurry through that in order to take it in. And each one of these stages of organization has its own identity, and its excitement and amazement.
Amazement extends even to the terraces, which are, of course, much more than terraces.
This is a black hole terrace, and what happens if you fall into a black hole, you get pulled, your feet get pulled more than your head. That's called being spaghettified. And you're pulled right in by the force of gravity, and you get pulled in towards the singularity, and space is stretched and time is compressed. You see all these things being compressed, and if you look closely, you see the stretch marks, and you get pulled into the singularity, and then you come out in a white hole where you eat dinner. And the white hole terrace here is the same sort of laws as a previous universe. So a black hole leads through a white hole into a baby universe, and the baby universe has similar laws to that universe. That means...
If you think about gravity, of all the forces, it's the most mysterious, and it's the most omnipresent. And this force holds the universe together as a unity. So I thought, you know, we really should celebrate gravity in this garden. And as things developed and as we were doing the garden, the black hole became more and more important in science as the fundamental, one of the fundamental ideas behind the universe. In fact, the universe may be a black hole.
At 2 a.m., more amazement, but this time of a most earthly nature. In a scene reminiscent of Cape Canaveral, the largest mobile crane in Europe moves a new railway bridge into position. It's no coincidence that the red structure echoes the red bridges already in the garden. Jenks worked closely with Network Rail to design the elegant curved spans. Not many people would be thrilled to have a train running through their property, but for Jenks, the new bridge represents fourth nature, the industrial garden.
In the 19th century in Canada and America, they used to have a train in the far distance, you know, in those Currier and Ives prints, and you could see the machine in the garden. And the combination of the machine, which represented progress and better life and food and all the rest of it, was quite picturesque in the far distance. And the garden, of course, represents what you want in life. So the combination is very potent.
The search for meaning in the universe has preoccupied us since we first looked up at the stars. We peer out from our garden planet, a tiny island in the vast cosmos, and create our stories, as changeable as the universe itself. In the middle of their children's swimming hole, Charles and Maggie built a small island, a reminder of the inescapable destiny of all life.
Maggie created this little island, and it's supposed to be the land of the immortals, because in Korea and China and Japan, there's always an offshore island where you want to go for the elixir of life, for longevity. And so in those Asian cultures, they think heaven or hell is that distant island, and that's what that little miniaturized mountain there and trees are.
The island faces a wilderness garden that Charles and Maggie called Heaven and Hell. Maggie planted primeval-looking Gunnera plants along the banks of the stream, and several dying elms were left to lie where they had fallen. It was to be a place of death and rebirth, but neither Charles nor Maggie anticipated that death would enter their garden paradise in such a personal way. In a quiet corner of this symbolic netherworld, Charles has placed a statue of Maggie.
In fact, we will end up with 6 red bridges in the garden. Yeah.
Through the woods beyond Heaven and Hell, the new railway bridge. It will anchor one end of the red garden Charles is designing to replace the old railway line, complete with a new set of mounds.
If this is an entrance,
It is going to be a really enhancement to the garden, a long linear garden, a railway garden, a red garden, you know, so I think that if anyone had to come back to Portrack in 2 to 3 years' time, they'll say, boy, Alistair and Charles were right when they say Portrack is going to keep growing and growing and growing.
Landscape is powerful, and there aren't many people that practice it as an art in our day. So Charlie's onto something, I think.
Much has changed since Maggie's death, both in the science of cosmology and in the garden where its mysteries are explored. And much, no doubt, will change in years to come. There will always be new questions to ask, new answers to seek, and new stories to tell.
you have to have wonder to go beyond what you know, and humility to interpret it and to get to nature's secrets. It's amazing that we're here at all, and it's amazing that we can begin to get a hint of what's underlying it all. So, festina lente, make haste to go slow. And in a garden, if you do go slowly, you can just let some ideas come in. You can hear the birds, you can listen to the water, you can meditate. That's what a garden is. It's a place not to rush through like the middle of the city, but to slow down and think and relax and enjoy life.